Israel has already announced a shift in operational approach for January, from sweeping clearing operations focused on eliminating Hamas's ability to wage war to small unit targeted raid-based operations focused on freeing hostages and eliminating Hamas's military leadership. If these operations are successful enough to bring some hostages home, we could see a ceasefire, but not until then. Watch the tumult in the US over support for Israel. Lawmakers have learned that the general bipartisan support for Israel is a useful lever to pull when they need votes in support of their own niche issue. As for the Abraham Accords, 2024 will be a wait-and-see year for countries that recognize they could benefit from Israeli technological innovations in agriculture, irrigation, desalination, things like this. But they'll need to take the temperature of their populations in the days after the war before getting on board. Iran has not lost a thing in this war. Their investment in Hamas has paid off for the most part. Hezbollah remains intact. The Houthis are providing useful in keeping Israel, the US, and the international trade community distracted. And the militias in Iraq are providing useful distraction at keeping the US military busy, so they can focus in Tehran on ramping up nuclear activity or cracking down on domestic opposition. This conflict in Israel and Gaza gives groups both fodder with which to recruit and plausible deniability tool that allows them to conduct attacks the world will assume were carried out by others.
The key things to look out for in 2024 in Ukraine are to look outside of Ukraine. If we look internally in Ukraine, we see a people that are highly mobilized, that are prepared to make the sacrifices necessary to defend their country, and have shown a great capacity to integrate a wide range of weapons technologies from the West and of new technologies and to use them in very creative ways. I don't think we will see any flagging of the Ukrainian spirit, although it is difficult for people to live through these constant bombings of major cities and to look at the trauma of people dying and being wounded and to cope with infrastructure damage and so on. So I think that the real question is, how strong will the flow of resources and especially of weapons be for Ukraine, and how resolute will both Europe and the United States be in providing that aid? If those things come together without great disruptions, I think that the Ukrainians have the capacity certainly to hold the front and to hold their current territories, but also to potentially make gains, or at least to make the Russian positions untenable for further incursions. Ukraine can use artillery and precision weapons to essentially demilitarize the Russian military, interrupt their supply chains into the country, and so on. If Ukraine gets the resources to fight this war, it will be able to impose certain limits on what Putin wants to do in terms of taking territory or even to some degree of holding territory. Obviously, Russia has and is producing a wide range of long-range missiles and attack drones and so on, and catching up to Ukraine, certainly in the drone department, and it can inflict a lot of damage. But again, if Ukraine gets adequate technologies, additional anti-aircraft defenses for major cities and installations, it should be able to cope and to exact a very high price from Russia.
The U.S. preparation for a potential conflict with China has been an evolving game, right? And it's unlikely to actually be in place until the 2030s. Even according to China themselves, the first phase of their military organization, reorganization and reformation and reform would not be completed until 2027. A connected invasion on the Chinese part is a very big commitment. They do have the capability to attempt such an invasion, but they won't do it until they think there's no other alternatives. For 2024 in Taiwan Strait, we want to look at, first of all, Chinese economic slowdown, what the implication of that is. Taiwan means a lot to the CCP's ruling legitimacy, and they understand there will be an economic cost. For the ramping up of military exercise around Taiwan in the past year or so, I think the bigger risk here is about stressing Taiwan's defenses, compressing the time for responses, both for Taiwan and potentially U.S. and its allies, especially if we think about, for example, the U.S. Marine stand-in strategy to basically be in the engagement zone to jockey for position before the beginning of a conflict. To compress that time frame, escalate the possibility of an inadvertent escalation.